Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to AEF's annual meeting, and welcome to our special guests, Mary Blaha and Debbie Burnett of Baird. I'm really excited to have their participation with us today. I know that as a superintendent in a small, rural, low-revenue school district, every change we made to capture additional revenues or reduce costs made a big difference in my budget. Debbie and I worked closely together on that, and she has just a great mind for this work. Debbie and Mary both have experience as business managers and are going to bring to us today tips and tricks from around the state, things that they've seen work in districts both large and small that have helped them capture more revenues and reduce expenses. So before I say anything more, I want to welcome Debbie and Mary and invite them to grab the screen and share with us more of the tips and tricks that they've learned from around the state. Welcome, ladies. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. I'll just take a moment to share my screen and get us started. And there we go.
Okay.
Looks great,
thank
Debbie.
you again to everybody who is taking time out of their day today to participate, and as we explore some ways that districts around the state are looking at how they can maximize their limited dollars. Debbie and I appreciate your time, and we hope that this presentation will provide you with some potential ideas that you can implement in your school district. I'm Mary Blaha, and Debbie is joining me today, and we are part of the Baird School Business Solutions team, or the Baird Public Finance team. We have an experienced banking team that provides specialized services around financial management and debt issuance planning and municipal bond market access. And you might wonder what that kind of means. Well, financial management can be things like looking for investment alternatives, and debt issuance planning can be looking at financing alternatives. And municipal bond market access gives you access to national sales force and diverse investors. And our school business solutions team centers around 4 different business solutions products and services, which include our Baird budget forecast model. That is a model that takes all of the different complex revenue limit worksheet in your equalization aid worksheet and all of your different funds and compiles that into one piece of a software, and we'll have some outputs that we can look at later. And then we also have our Baird video library, which provides more than 100 interactive videos. And those are short videos on all kinds of school finance topics. So they can provide basically an overview and to know and to do on those videos. You might find those useful just to like brush up on a school finance topic, or if you're trying to explain to your board or your administrative team a complex idea like, is our district positively or negatively aided? Just a quick little 3-minute video might help to explain that kind of topic. And then we have our Baird School Analytics software, and that's provides districts with a way to take all of the different types of school district data that are used in making data-driven decisions. And it's not just looking at revenues and expenses, but it's taking student academic data and staff data and putting that into a more easy to read visuals to help you make decisions. And then we have our business office training and consulting. And we provide training. It can be virtual on-site mentoring for school districts around the state. And then also providing training. And so today is actually an example of some of our training. So let's set the stage for something that we might commonly see. This is actually an output from our budget forecast model. And you can see that this is a fictional district, but some people may be able to relate to it. this has a basic budget forecast, and this is a pretty standard status quo forecast. So the membership in this is steady membership at $1,500 per student each year, FTE, and then also a per pupil increase of 0 and a per pupil categorical aid increase of 0, no change, and no change to equalized valuation growth. The only change that is projected in here is an increase in salaries and fringe benefits, just a typical maybe like 2% increase. And that's because based on this fictional school district, they aren't having any decline in enrollment, not planning on really having any changes to staffing. So what does that look like? And by just plugging in those factors, you can see that surplus deficit in the middle of the output where it's red. And in the 2022-2023 school year, it's showing a deficit, and that deficit grows each year into the future. So for some districts, this could be a pretty conservative type of look at what's happening with budgets into the future. And for other school districts, they may know that they have other types of data indicators, declining enrollment that they already know, or increasing enrollment, and those sorts of things that could be factored in. But this is just kind of how you can see how there's already a structural deficit in place for this school district. So by just making a few small changes, there you can see that the surplus deficit changes for the same school district. This is the same school district. No factors have changed other than there are a few differences. This district has decided to offer more summer school programming. So that increases the summer school membership FTE. And one thing that is nice about increasing the summer school membership FTE is that then increases your revenue limit, allowable revenue limit, and then that carries forward into each year. So that is a way to increase revenues. This district also looked at increasing their Fund 27 revenues. And there are a few ways of increasing your Fund 27 revenues. That can be, so in this example, increasing Medicaid reimbursement and also high cost special education aid reimbursements. And the nice thing about increasing Fund 27 revenues, when you do that, then you may be able to lower that transfer from Fund 27, from Fund 10 to Fund 27. So that frees up or reduces your Fund 10 expenditures or frees up additional revenues to be used in other areas for all students. This district also then looked at decreasing costs in personal services. So looking at some ongoing contracts, like maybe a maintenance contract or any other sort of ongoing agreement that's been in place, reassessing and reevaluating that and saying, is there a change that we can make to those contracts? And by doing that, again, then that can result in some ongoing savings. So all of these examples were very small, minor changes, but you can see then in the middle of that output, that surplus deficit, how that has flipped. So we went from having a deficit in the 2022-2023 school year, and now actually there is a surplus. It's a small surplus, but it's still better than a deficit. And even in the second year, we still have a surplus, and there are still deficits projected into those other years, but they are smaller deficits. So maybe something that is a little bit more manageable. So our goal for you today is we are hoping to give you an idea that may help you generate some revenue or modify expenditures or create stability or efficiencies for students in your school district. So we know that many of you have a process or a program in place, and we hope that during this presentation that you start to think about what you do in your district. And we hope that you would be willing to share those ideas and maybe plant a seed for implementation into another district. So you heard me say, let's raise revenue, generate revenue, and you were probably thinking, okay, how do we do that? We can't raise the tax levy without going to referendum. So are we talking about referendum? And we're not talking about referendum today. And we also know that districts can't just like raise their prices like you probably see in the grocery store at the gas station due to supply and demand. So what can districts do to potentially generate a little bit more additional revenue? So one of those ways is by implementing using a district credit card that pays a rebate. So a P card, purchasing card rebate. And by using that card to pay for costs that the district is already spending, you may be able to achieve an annual rebate. However, I would have to say that that comes with some cautions. Be careful about how that works. If you would hand out a credit card to everybody in the school district, you may find that it's actually more work than what you would get in your rebate. So, and also the amount of time that it takes to process that. So you will get your credit card statement in the mail or electronically, most likely. And the amount of time that it takes before you pay that will impact the size of that rebate. So the longer it takes to turn around that invoice and get it paid will result in a lower amount of a rebate for you. And if you have a lot of credit card usage and it's turning into a lot of time to process it, you might actually find that you are spending more time than what that rebate is worth. So be strategic with it. Maybe use that only for purchases that are happening in the district office, that you can know that right away you can make that turnaround when you get that statement. So that way it's not taking a lot of staff time to track that credit card, all of those credit card charges. And instead you can try to take advantage of that rebate. And then also make sure that if you are using a district credit card, that you are not being charged an additional charge to use that credit card, because there are some vendors that if you are paying with a credit card, it may result in an additional charge. Facilities use. Is there a way to create after school schedules that maximize your staff? So like other employers, school districts are challenged to find enough staff. And by consolidating where activities are happening into maybe one location, that may be able to free up some, actually maybe not free up staff, but maybe help you to address a staff shortage so that you're not having to have staff at all of your school district buildings every night, and you can have them only at one place. And that way you can still offer the use of your facilities to your community if that's something that the community expects, but it's scheduled and maximized at one location. Another option is offering summer school courses. And, in our example, we talked about summer school a little bit and how that was so beneficial for adding membership FTE to the revenue limit. And offering summer school courses really is a great opportunity to offer enrichment and supplemental classes to your students. And so there are some school districts in our state that offer a back to school program in the last couple of weeks of August. And they offer an all-day program, which is really nice because that maximizes the number of summer school minutes that you can record and count for membership. And then also it provides an opportunity for like the school food service department to offer lunches, maybe even breakfast and lunches. And that's a way possibly for the food service department to generate some additional revenue beyond just serving on those maybe 180 school days, that they can expand it a little bit further. And you can offer transportation, but you do not need to offer door-to-door transportation. So the nice thing about that is that you're still providing some transportation to maybe a few pickup points, maybe at some daycares or boys and girls clubs, that you are able to get those students in and have them at school all day and maximize those membership minutes for FTE. And at the same time, it's a way, by doing this back to school, it's a way for everybody to kind of brush off those cobwebs that came over the summer. So, it's good for the students, it's good for the staff, it's good for your support staff to kind of be ready to go then when September 1 rolls around. There are some other ways of generating revenue, and these ideas that I'm going to share now may actually take a little bit more planning and collaboration to implement. So one of the areas is if you're a school district that runs its own buses and you have your own buses, you probably have a schedule for purchasing those buses and probably thinking, well, we'll purchase like one bus each year to kind of spread out the costs. Well, if you also may qualify for high cost transportation aid, it may be beneficial to actually look at the timing of those bus purchases. And instead of purchasing one each year, purchase two in 1 year. And then that will raise your transportation expenditures for that year so that you receive aid in the following year. And then the nice thing about that high cost transportation aid is that in the second year, you will receive 50% of the aid that you had received in the other year. So that's a way of generating revenue into a couple more years for you to support transportation costs. Another thing is looking at special education. So there are opportunities for some school districts to receive federal or state aid for special education costs, but it's really important to identify what those expenditures are so that you are maximizing the reimbursement, as the reimbursement actually is based off of how those costs are coded. So it means that the special education department and the business office should be collaborating on that to make sure that they have people in the correct codes so that when the reports are filed and the state compiles aid, that they are capturing the correct expenditures and then also revenue. So the state actually allows districts to plan ahead for certain costs. And one of those is Fund 73, which has a long official name of Pension and Other Post-Employment Benefit Fund. It's the Fund 73. And what's nice about that is that allows school districts to save for future other post-employment benefit costs. So if you have end of the year, if you have an end of the year surplus, you may be able then to put that into your Fund 73. And if you are a positively aided school district, that is beneficial for you because you can count that as a shared cost to be able to maximize the amount of equalization aid you can get in the future year. We know that equalization aid doesn't allow you to have more money to spend, but the nice thing is that you are basically saving that money for that future expense that you know that you're going to have for another post-employment benefit. So that might be another way of generating a little bit of either savings or actually revenue going forward. And then geographically, many districts are close to each other, and with some planning, they may be able to share some different programs amongst each other. So one of those is food service. So is it possible to have a centralized kitchen that cooks the food and then delivers it to other buildings, and not necessarily just the buildings within your school district, but maybe a little bit further out? And if you think about that, school district kitchens have a lot of very expensive specialized equipment, and it's being duplicated in all of these different buildings. So if you would have a centralized kitchen where your staff, and obviously that's where you're going to need the most of your staff, are available to prepare and cook the food, and then it's transported to the other school buildings, whether they're in your district or in a neighboring district, if that is a way to reduce then also the need that you need for staff, for cooks in every single building, that may be an opportunity for either the host district that is hosting the food service to generate maybe some revenue, and also just addressing again the staffing need that the districts are seeing in almost every area. And speaking of finding qualified staff, and also looking at declining enrollment that a lot of districts are experiencing, and also looking at, is there a way to share different focused programs? So for example, in area schools, there may be a school that has, they have an ag teacher, and a neighboring district does not have an ag teacher. Is there a way that they could say, well, you know, we have an ag teacher, but in the other district we have construction, and maybe to figure out how to share those schedules so that the students still have access to going to the ones who are interested in ag, that there would be enough students then to have that class and that teacher and to support that. And then the other students who are interested in, say, construction or another technology sort of class, that they may be able to work their schedules so that they can attend those specialized classes in that district, but then go back to their home district for the rest of their classes. Now I realize that that does definitely take some collaboration and planning, but it may be ways of providing for opportunities for students and also addressing what we know is a critical shortage of teachers for some of these areas. Another area could be looking at sharing costs for athletic facilities. Thank you, Debbie. Sorry. And this could be a way, it's innovative and it would be thinking outside the box for school districts, but I see it as similar to food service. Rather than having every district having, you know, a competition and a really nice competition facility, what if there were shared facilities and there could be practice facilities in the other locations, but then all of our students have access to the state-of-the-art competition facilities. Again, that would take some scheduling and collaboration, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it may be something that there are, you know, availability of options out there.
And if Mary, I can just touch on that one for a second,
Sure.
give a bit of a break too. This facility one, I think has a lot of potential that hasn't yet been tapped. And I live in the Eau Claire area, and Eau Claire has Carson Park, which is shared by the two Eau Claire high schools, the public schools. It's shared by the private school, and then they have some AAA level teams that also utilize the field. And so oftentimes I'll say, if a field like that can juggle two large high schools and at least one private school in conjunction with it, then maybe there are some opportunities for us as smaller districts to come together in a similar way, especially when we talk about football fields and the limited number of home games that actually occur. So like Mary said, difficult opportunities or challenges in scheduling, but something that could be really exciting and generate savings not only for the school, but could be for the taxpayers as well with referendum type conversations. So sorry,
Debbie,
Mary.
you can probably see me popping up with this fuzzy noggin here. And I want to appreciate the thinking outside of the box on this. And, you know, the athletic facilities can be so very expensive. And I guess I want to also open it up. We've got about 35 people here this afternoon, and certainly our intent was not to have no question and answer. And I probably could have clarified that at the beginning. I don't see a chat box, and I'm not seeing people raising their hands. So I would just offer to people that if you want to unmute or if you want to go on screen, that we'd be happy to take questions and answer any questions or thoughts about the information that Mary just shared. I guess I had one quick one, Mary. on the bus purchases, what if a district is purchasing 2 or 3? Does that sort of timing issue still come into play?
Yeah, so if you are, what it does is it's looking at your costs compared to the state average. I believe that's the way that is calculated with the high cost transportation. So if you would want to look at that formula and see where you are falling when you are planning for making those purchases.
So if you're purchasing 2 a year, purchase 4 in 1 year and none the next year, same kind of model, but look at the math.
Right. Yeah. Look at the math and math it out and see if it is going to help you generate, if it's going to put you over that so you can qualify for that.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to work for everybody, but
no, it's great. And those are the kinds of things like, oh, we just do this slightly differently. And all of a sudden we're capturing, is it 5,000? Is it 25,000? It's money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And
I saw somebody popping up here and I just opened that up for anybody.
Yeah, this is Paul Fisher in Alma Center. Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Hi, Paul.
Long time no see. Thanks for being here, Mary and Debbie. Just a question regarding the summer school piece. I've heard the idea floated around about, the end of August and kind of that kickstart to start the year. And I've heard varying ways in which to approach that. I guess what you've seen or what's worked in regards to, again, I've seen where it goes into the teacher's contract for the 190 days, but I've also seen it where they're actually paying all staff summer school rate or summer school pay for that period of time. So just, I guess, if you have any follow-up or any other ideas relating to set staff contracts or how that's worked around, that would be helpful.
Yeah. If
Go ahead, Debbie.
On the call, who I think this is, like John said, a great opportunity for us to learn from one another. If anyone who's on the call has implemented that structure and would like to share, it'd be a great opportunity now, if you're willing. Otherwise, I can backfill with what I've been seeing as well. But it'd be nice to hear firsthand. Oh, Paul's raising his hand.
Yeah, so Paul Schlein, Cornell. We did this quite a few years ago already, and we included it as part of the teacher's contract, so we could get the biggest bang for the buck. And so, yeah, we generated a whole lot of revenue. We actually had 7 days before September 1st that we ran as summer school, and we've stopped doing it now with the waivers the last few years, and then we are starting to get less participation because some parents are figuring out, well, the kids don't need to be there, and so they didn't make their kids go. So we were down under 50%, but the first couple of years were big money makers for us. Now other districts, for whatever reason, the culture is different and the parents actually keep sending the kids. So it is definitely a good benefit, Paul, and something that you might want to take a look at doing.
Yeah, I agree. We've used the waiver, the last couple of years to get started early because we had explored that option. I know locally here, like GET and some others have started earlier, but just heard mixed ways in which to go about doing it. And so with the teacher's contract at 190 days, so theoretically, if we stick with the Wisconsin not being able to start before September 1, you start 7 days ahead of time because it's summer school, you're still going to get out at a decent time in May because your contract days are going to be reached sometime in May, more than likely then, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Paul.
Hi, this is Corey Cooley-Galibus-Chung. We started that about 4 years ago where we put that into the teacher's contracts. We started with 3 days. We've moved all the way up to 5 days, but we realized that 5 days is a lot, especially when you're doing, icebreaker type activities and things like that. So kind of like Paul said, we're starting to have parents question it a little bit. So we tapered back to 3 days. It's been pretty popular for us, especially from the elementary side of things. High school, they push the envelope a little bit more and buck the system a little bit, but we're going to continue doing it just because it's a great way for us to get through a lot of that beginning of the year type stuff, and then we can hit the ground running with instruction on September 1st.
That's really great discussion. Thank you for sharing.
This is Jeff Koenig at Stanley Boyd, and I just want to comment one thing on the high cost transportation aid you touched on, and that is if you can afford to do it, don't trade anything in, whether you're buying buses or a vehicle. Because when you trade it in, it reduces the cost. And we buy a lot of vehicles, but we always sell them on the Wisconsin surplus site, and we get more than we would for trading them in. And then we're aided on the full cost of the purchase, not the reduced cost for the traded value.
Thanks for the very practical, been there, done that experience and sharing it.
Hey, Debbie or Mary, both, just your experience on a question. We're generating some ideas. I think all of us on here can probably agree with the daycare shortage we're seeing in our communities, especially rural ones. Is there any possibility, potential of using Fund 80 funds to create or start some type of daycare, or utilize those funds for daycare in any way, shape, or form? I know this is a little bit off topic, but yet it's still ways in which we can address some of our needs in rural areas.
Absolutely, you can. If you're a high aided district, it may not pan out as well for you, but definitely could use Fund 80.
Perfect.
We've been running a daycare for many years at Spencer. If you want one more discussion, give me a holler. Mike Endress at Spencer.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
You bet.
That's great. Great. Already some ideas being generated and shared. I really appreciate that because that is exactly what we were hoping would happen. So you guys have us very excited. I'm just going to shift gears just a little bit. I'm really focusing in on Fund 27 and some ways to be strategic with your funding in Fund 27. And so we're just going to jump into that a little bit. So if you remember when I was talking about our fictional district at the beginning, and I said that they tried to get some more Medicaid and high cost special education aid for their students. So with Medicaid, you can claim Medicaid for certain services that are given to your special education students who have Medicaid. However, you do need to make sure that there has been approval from their guardian before you would bill Medicaid. And also, you want to be sure then whoever is providing that Medicaid service, that they are not being funded with flow-through dollars. So Medicaid dollars are federal dollars, and so are flow-through dollars. So if that physical therapist is billing for Medicaid, then make sure that you don't have them coded to flow through. So again, that's another example of where the special education department and the business services department should be actually reviewing that probably at least once a year, maybe even more than that, because who is providing Medicaid eligible services and who is billing may change during the year. So we can't double dip. So if they are going through the process of billing for Medicaid, you don't want them to have them in flow through. And then high cost special education aid is a state aid, and that is an aid for certain special education students whose costs may exceed $30,000. And the high cost special education aid is actually an aid that you can apply for the claim in the year after the cost has incurred. So right now that window is open to apply for high cost special education aid, but those are for students whose costs were exceeding $30,000 for last year. So you want to make sure that you are keeping really good documentation, because it's kind of a challenge to go back almost when you're mid-year of one school year to go back to the other school year to try to recreate what it was that you needed in order to figure out the cost for that student. So again, make sure that you're keeping really good records, so that way it makes it easy to fill out that high cost special education aid application. For maintenance of effort, districts are required to provide a certain level of support for special education. And there are some opportunities for reducing that maintenance of effort. There may be some opportunities if you have staff who leave and you hire, so maybe you have a veteran teacher who retires or voluntarily leaves, and you bring in a teacher who is maybe lower on the pay scale. So there may be a savings there, but that needs to be documented in WISE grants in order to apply for an exemption to that maintenance of effort. And that you don't want to actually lose that, because if you can apply for that exemption, that may lower that fund transfer from Fund 10, again, giving you a little bit more flexibility for spending for all students. And then another thing is actually using flow-through funds, which quite often we think of flow-through funds as just being used for special education students, but there is actually an opportunity to use flow-through funds for Title I school-wide services. So that is a way to use those flow-through funds for more than just certain special education students. And it's an opportunity for school districts to, again, maybe find a little bit of how they can be strategic with the funding that they have. And again, so the caution with those is that you really need to make sure that you are coding everything appropriately. So that way, when it comes time to submitting the state reports, that you're getting the aid where you should, and that you aren't double dipping when you didn't mean to be, and missing out on that, or missing out on claiming some of those exemptions or anything like that. So we already had a little bit of discussion, but does anybody else have any other ideas on how they generate revenue?
No, I can piggyback on that, Mary. With the Medicaid, and watching out that you don't double dip with your special ed staff. We run all special ed staff right through our regular funds and make the transfer on them rather than using flow through funds on any people at all. And with the flexibility you have a flow through now, and like you said, with title and getting things done, we can easily put all the people in through our regular budget and make that transfer, and then it just increase our categorical aid. And so it's really generating more revenue if you can afford to have a bigger transfer. It works out well in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And that isn't that, I think, when going forward, if the categorical aid amounts continue to increase as as we hope that they might, that might be even another great opportunity to look at.
We'll keep thinking of those ideas. We're going to shift gears to the expenditure side. But the last item I'll mention on this before we move on is I was working with a district, it's about a month ago, and I learned that they weren't claiming Medicaid. They just weren't participating in the program. And I guess I just assumed everyone was. But if you are not, if you are like them, it could generate $10, $20, $30, $40,000 in additional revenue for you, depending on your student population and the services that you provide, maybe even more. So if it is not something you're doing, it is worth at least investigating. Again, I was incorrectly thinking that everyone did. So we're going to shift to expenditures. And again, please interrupt us if you have ideas. We will pause at the end and ask for our ideas from you. Our goal through this, again, is not to provide every answer to you, but really just to get you thinking and also have you share as experts. So one of the general ones we'll start with expenditures is just being thoughtful with dollars you have today that could help you in the future. We just had an open gym yesterday, and I was talking with the district about this. They had a surplus this year in their budget, and they budgeted to put those dollars into Fund 46. And I know many of you use that strategy. Other places those dollars could go could be Fund 73. You could prepay non-energy efficiency Fund 38 debt. The reason why we say non-EE Fund 38 debt is because you can levy extra for energy efficiency payments. But anytime you can put money away or prepay those sorts of items today, 5 years from now, when your budget may be tighter, you may be short of funds, you have that cushion. Fund 38 debt, when it is paid off, that's money you can spend in Fund 10. Fund 46 or Fund 73 could be tapped into to make payments that you might otherwise have to pay in Fund 10. So those are key examples, and there are others. Purchasing something this year, that purchasing curriculum with ESSER funds, which is one-time money, so you don't carry those forward. So many examples you can probably think of, but definitely worth exploring, thinking beyond just this year. One we talk about quite often in the fall especially, but as it leads into the spring, but always taking advantage of prepaying or defeasing your Fund 39 debt. And again, that impacts our aid, so doesn't give us more or less to spend for a majority of districts, but it does help us with our tax levy and therefore potentially provide other opportunities if you were to go for operational referendum or the such. It can also just generate savings. Maybe you're refinancing a Fund 38 issue in a low interest rate environment. That can create operational savings as well. So I think oftentimes the message in this is we look to Fund 10 and things that we can reduce or enhance. Maybe we even expand it to Fund 27. Our encouragement through this slide is to look beyond just those general funds. There could be strategies you can deploy in others as well. Moving on to, oh, go ahead, Janelle.
I just wanted to say that we've been doing debt defeasance in our district for several years now, and it's allowing us to go to referendum this fall at a very reduced cost because we were able to levy over additional years. So what we did was we maintained the same tax rate impact, and the payoff with the defeasance is allowing us to go to referendum again at a very low cost. Whereas if we didn't do that strategy, we just had a referendum in 2017. So it probably would have been hard for us to get the support we needed without that strategy.
Mm-hmm. Excellent example, thank you. And hi, Janelle. Okay, thinking of some other expenditures. So here's we'll rattle off some ideas again, also trying to get you thinking. But with grant purchases, this is really important. And we label this modify expenditures, not reduce expenditures. So be very thoughtful of that as we list these items. Starting with grant purchases, be extra conscientious of this as it comes to our ESSER allocations. And you likely have already thought of this, but be cautious when using grant funds for ongoing costs. We say a lot, we're using one-time money for one-time things. Title I is different. We know we're getting it every year. Therefore, we often pay Title I specialists out of Title I funds. But when it comes to our one-time grants, and ESSER is an example, when possible, avoid those ongoing expenditures, because when the grant funds are gone, if those expenditures aren't going to be reduced along with it, you've now created a potential deficit in your budget. And without another plan, that has to be covered elsewhere. One idea we have heard when it comes to ESSER funds is, can you cover implementation costs or do something today that can help you tomorrow? I've heard a lot of ideas, and I think later when we're done, if you have a few minutes to talk about strategies around ESSER funds, we've heard a lot of creative solutions, and I think you could benefit from learning from one another. But could you purchase the curriculum that can then be implemented? Many know that a reading curriculum, for example, can be very costly. So can that come out of ESSER funds as your purchase? And then the implementation of it, the use of it, come out of the general fund. So just thoughtful as to what and how you're purchasing. Common school funds. Common school funds are our library funds that DPI has been tracking even more closely in most recent years. Many know that the common school funds have to be used for library purchases. Consider, instead of library books or hard copy materials, consider technology. If used in the library and or checked out from the library, it becomes an eligible purchase. So iPads that can be checked out of the library for use. Many ideas have come up, audio players, any sort of those electronic services that you can house there. It can provide some relief possibly in your technology budget. The other thing, little known fact, is that you can always also use common school funds for 4th grade history curriculum. And many school districts still teach Wisconsin history in 4th grade. And so this could be a way to utilize your common school funds in a meaningful way. One of the challenges I see is when $20,000, $30,000 of library books are purchased in libraries every year just to use up their common school funds, when we know that although books are important, they aren't the main focus of how we educate our students today. So this could give you some creative ways to use those funds in a meaningful way today. Another idea for modifying expenditures, we've been seeing or hearing this quite a bit. Think of your electives or possibly the 0 hour that you added to your programs in order to meet the needs of your students. What we're seeing is districts, as enrollment has changed, and for many districts enrollment, and I'm talking head count, they've seen a decline in their head count. Maybe you don't need that 0 hour anymore. Maybe you don't need to offer your club as an after school activity. Maybe club can occur during the school day, and the savings there then is the extra contract that goes along with it, or that 0 hour overload that was needed. So just taking an extra look at those courses, programs, offerings that were implemented, possibly when you had a higher enrollment and had the need, and maybe it might look different. Another example is reviewing contracts or possibly auditing your services. I was talking with a district middle of the state, and new business official came in, replaced an experienced, very good business official. And she just started to ask questions about the copiers and the printers, and specifically, and I find this interesting too, we're moving to an age of more electronics, and yet it seems like we're adding more and more printers around our buildings. So this business official reviewed her copier and printer contracts with their vendor, and one found that they had been overcharged for a period of time, and also worked within their team to more strategically place their printers, and they found a $20,000 annual savings. And so items like that. Another district I talked with, they had, it was a CISA come in and help audit the systems they use. They focused on special ed. They found that their staff was struggling to meet the demands of the programs, and they weren't quite sure if it was a staffing issue or a systems issue. And so CISA was able to come in and look at their systems. And although they just have the report and they haven't implemented anything, they expect it to help in the future, maybe not by reducing staff, that wasn't the goal, but to possibly mitigate the need to add staff, aides, and teachers in and extra pay in the future. So all things that we can possibly do and explore or add to our tickler list of things to keep in mind when we're looking at our expenditures and its potential growth when revenues are slight. Revenue growth is slight. So here's another one. This is just to get you thinking, because we're going to open this up for all expenditure ideas, but many of us are struggling with transportation. And I often, when given the opportunity, ask if we can look at transportation differently. So whether you contract your transportation or whether you operate your own, throughout Wisconsin and throughout the US, there is a driver shortage. And so here are some ideas. These aren't all mine, but as I've talked with others about this concept, here's some ideas we came up with. And they're here. Maybe they would work in your district, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would sprout some other ideas. So one idea is, can you run fewer buses in the afternoon? In the morning, most students, if they're riding, are riding in. In the afternoon, you have your co-curriculars, you have your after-school programs that often result in fewer students on that PM route. So can you address a potential shortage by running fewer in the PM in the afternoon and still meet your timeline in terms of the student ride time guidelines? Can you add or change something within your day that can reduce route time? And so an example I heard in a district was possibly they offer a 0 hour before school. Or I think another district said they stagger their times between their buildings. So could you get enough students to school in the morning, for example, so that there were fewer students? Because oftentimes I hear in rural districts, they say our buses aren't full, but if we reduce a route, the kids are on the bus too long. So could you find an opportunity to adjust your schedule or offerings in order to either reduce students more or something to that effect? When I was, I actually experienced this next one, considering double busing with a neighbor or combining in part. So many larger districts will double bus. They'll go pick up their elementary students first, and then those same buses will go out and pick up the high school, for example. We've actually explored the option of doing that same concept with the neighboring district. And that study showed that we could possibly save $30,000 a year. And that neighboring school district or our district would only have to adjust our start time by 5 or 10 minutes. And that was just an example and years ago, and interestingly enough, never implemented. But could there be an option between you and another district to do something like this? Can you combine it with other positions? Do you have a part-time aide that would be willing or could drive bus in the morning? Could you hire a custodian that's a combination bus driver, half-time, custodian, part-time? So are there opportunities there? We've even had districts say, what if we gave everyone a parent transportation contract? Could that solve our ideas? And the newest one I heard most recently is many districts share staff, especially the smaller districts. Could that shared staff member drive a van, or that was the example used, with students in it that helped pick up the outlier students that increase the drive time to help? So I just think what I like about these ideas is it's about just looking at transportation differently, not continuing to post in order to find more drivers. So I don't know if any of these will work, but we thought it worth mentioning in this group specifically. Are there any other ideas you have in terms of adjusting expenditures that you think the group might benefit from? Okay, so our last section is about efficiencies. We have just a few ideas here, but we really think or want to focus on time equals money. And oftentimes, I think we're so focused on saving money or not impacting the money side of the budget that we can sometimes lose sight of that. So here are some ideas. Accuracy to avoid audits. I can speak personally in the district I was in. Every year, they charge $2 per person for summer school enrollment. And we had a membership audit year after year after year because they started to more closely audit the expenses versus the consumables. And we realized that $500 that was being charged, or even $1,000, was causing us $2,000 or $3,000 in a membership audit every year until we got it straightened out. So are there things that are happening in your district that you're charging for or doing that are actually costing you more in other areas? And the membership audit's an example. You're required every 3 years. But if you're getting more than that, maybe there's something you can do to be more accurate in order to avoid it. Here's some grant ideas. I work with a lot of districts. Mary has just been helping a district too, where grants are really bogging them down. And so we have some tips and tricks for you if this is happening to you as well. So plan for the grant. So often I talk with a district who at the end of the year, they haven't budgeted anything, they haven't made a claim, and they aren't really sure what they could have spent it on, and they spend a lot of time backtracking. So can you plan up front, have a more strategic system, and avoid that at year end? We also recommend using the grant money on big cost centers. We all know that it can take, it's a lot more work to add up and track $150 transactions than it is to do one larger one. And so anytime you can, for example, in Title 2A, use it to offset the cost, reduce class size. That is a lot easier to claim and maintain than to track down 10 different conferences that you paid for. One tip that we've seen more and more districts do and save them time, especially at year end, is for those staff members who don't have enough grant funds to cover their whole salary, or maybe you're only claiming them in part, consider in payroll setting them at 100% at the beginning of the year. When the grant funds run out, you can place your final claim mid-year, and then you can switch them back to the non-grant code for the rest of the year. And we find that that system eliminates the need at year end to calculate and record all those payables, which saves you time in a very busy time of year. And then just making sure that your WISE grants and your financial software match and reconcile so that you aren't tracking down the variances that really do take a lot of time. So my favorite one out of that is the 100% until claimed. Just a few more, because I know we're pressing up on time as well. We just want to encourage you to use your financial software efficiencies. So if you use Skyward, for example, there's the task manager, employee access, sub-tracking. You can import budgets, you can import journal entries, you can import cash receipts. So a lot of that data entry, the manual entry, can be automated. TrueTime is an example we don't have on here. And we just have a note that sometimes these efficiencies mean letting go of the liked task. I still talk with people who work in the payroll department, and they just still really enjoy stuffing paychecks. But having that on employee access, where employees can go out and view their own paycheck, is very much a time saver. I also talked with a district who they still do paper checks because they believe that by doing paper checks that they will cash, it'll take people longer to cash, and therefore they can keep their cash longer. And I argue in this interest rate environment, you're actually costing more in the time it takes to stuff checks and distribute checks and have postage on checks. And so exploring your systems and seeing if there are any ways you can save time and money. Tied to that are electronic solutions, check scanners, label makers. I was working in a district last week, and her workstation was one monitor and a laptop. She didn't have a keyboard, she didn't have a mouse. And that lack of system really takes time, which equals money. So getting that equipment, we always talked in the ballroom dance world, if you're gonna play a sport, get the gear. And so make sure that you're set up with that gear to keep you efficient and really maximize that limited time that you have, because we all know that things don't get taken off our plates. They oftentimes just get added to. And then exploring e-payments. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have cash, the time to count it and track it, and the potential, the liability that cash creates versus an e-payment. So if possible, can you set up a fee tracking or something so the monies come in electronically? And then the last idea I'll highlight as we come to a close is that I think especially relates to us is in our cross training. So oftentimes I hear in districts with limited staff, limited resources, they say we just don't have time to cross train. We know how important it is. One thing that I've started implementing with districts I work with, and I've seen others do as well, is instead of having someone sit side by side, which does take more time to cross train, they're just using Zoom or a like platform to record themselves doing a task. That recording can be saved. It can be referenced by the person doing it, or it can just be set aside. And if for any reason that person was gone, they needed to take a leave or they won the lottery, you could pull out that video and it might not apply 100% to what they're doing right now, but it often is enough and even more valuable than having someone just sit next to them for a few minutes a year ago. And then we had some other ideas such as, create as you go. Oftentimes we hear people say, I just don't have time to create it. We just suggest if it's that spreadsheet, just create it as you go. I started a to-do list 5 years ago. And instead of stopping and creating that list all in one day, every time I had something that I knew I needed to do, I added it to an electronic list. 5 years later, I have a list of everything I need to do, almost everything, almost every day. And it doesn't take long for that to be created. So what can you do today to help you tomorrow as well?
Debbie, I couldn't decide whether to interrupt you or not, because I just got an email from somebody that says, thank you so much. Listening in on this, tons of great ideas. Seriously, how do we repeat these types of conversations? And I decided I should jump in because I want you to save some ideas, and we got to have you back. This has just been so amazing and fun. And I think the level of engagement from our members is really a positive. Any other quick things to share, and then I'll twist your arm behind the scenes and see if we can get you guys back.
No, you reached our summary slide. We're just going to ask if we're just hopeful that that attendees had one idea they would consider exploring, either that they heard from us or others share throughout. And so really it was just opening it up for other ideas. So we're ready to pass it back to you.
Well, thank you.
If you had anything to add, I apologize.
Yeah,
I don't. I just really am excited about what people have already shared. It's really great to hear ideas from around the state. I think that we can all help each other, and maybe you might not incorporate that exact same idea, but tweak it to work wherever you're at. And that's just what is so exciting.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, I really want to just express again my thanks on behalf of AEF for your time and effort that you put into this. And thank you for planning ahead with us for the conference that didn't happen, but turned into such a neat way to share information, and the fact that we could record this. I'll put out an email, things like, do you buy a bus every year? You might want to rethink that. Look at our video. Do you trade in your vehicles, or do you sell them when you don't need them anymore? Here's a good answer to that question. Watch the video. Do you claim transportation for Medicaid? Do you run fewer afternoon buses than morning buses? All those things are things that people can learn about in this by watching this video. So I want to thank you again, and encourage folks to watch their emails that will help to get Mary and Debbie back, or either one of you I'm sure has all kinds of additional ideas to share. So thanks again. We're going to have to transition now to our annual meeting, and really on behalf of AEF and our membership, thank you so very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.